Hello, 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 and welcome to another CEO Salon series with Oliver Scholars. I'm your host and the CEO of Oliver Scholars. My name is Dr. Danielle Moss, and I'm really excited for some reason about this conversation about college access, college admissions, and financial aid, because to me, it really speaks to the possibility of young people and provides an excellent way for us to support them in kind of pursuing their educational dreams and really having a huge impact on society. So with that, I'm really excited about our panelists today. I'm connected to each of them for a variety of unique reasons. And I'm going to begin the conversation by introducing Scott White, who is a graduate of Swarthmore, my alma mater. Hey, but he is also, interestingly enough, my actual high school guidance counselor. So the quick and dirty story is that my first two choices were Oberlin and Vassar. I got into both. Scott, however, was a Swarthmore alum, and he really encouraged me to take a look at the school. And as we know, the rest is history. He is retired after 40 years of service in college admissions and guidance. He's a leading expert on college admissions and is frequently quoted in national publications. He's presently working as an independent counselor at SW College Consulting. It is so good to be reconnected, Scott.
Nice to see you again after how many years?
I know, it's been a minute. I don't know if we want to age each other in that way, right?
We were both very young back then.
Yes, for sure. So our next panelist is Randy Fraser. He is a graduate of Wheaton College and the University of Albany. He was a Posse Scholar. And he is also, fortunately for us, the Associate Director for College Bound Initiatives at Oliver Scholars. Randy, thank you so much for joining this conversation.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Moss.
Glad to have you. And last but certainly not least is someone who's actually not a stranger to the Oliver Scholars community. She's generously donated many hours of volunteer service at the organization, helping our families navigate financial aid. Her name is Adrienne Kay. She's a graduate of Lehman and Baruch colleges. She has 25 years of student financial aid experience, and she currently serves as the Senior Associate Director of Financial Aid at Bank Street College of Education's Graduate School. Hey, Adrienne.
Hey, Danielle. Good evening. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm stoked about this conversation. After a really rocky semester, I think, not just for us as adults trying to figure out what was next, but in particular for our students and our juniors in particular, I'm really excited about having this conversation because folks really don't know what to expect from this process when they start to apply to schools in the fall. So with that, I want to start with my first question, which is, what are you hearing from students and parents in terms of their concerns about how the pandemic has impacted their college aspirations? I know that some students in our program, for example, might be worried about how their grades for this semester will be interpreted, but have you guys been hearing anything else from the community on this issue?
There's a bit of panic about it. I mean, a lot of kids feel like can't demonstrate things now. Their grades have been pass-fail, they can't do sports, they can't do performing arts, etc. And my advice to them is that they're all on a level playing field. It's not only them who can do that, it's all the other people who are applying as well. So that's nothing to be panicking about. And for many of them, they may have to be able to be sort of comfortable with the idea that they're mostly going to be assessed on what they did midway through the junior year. Because even the senior year is not going to be a normal circumstance for these kids. And, you know, I just read something in the paper today about what kind of money it will cost for schools to do what high schools to do what the CDC says they're supposed to be doing. And I don't know that that's going to be possible, buying gloves and having smaller classes and everything else. So I think a lot of them, the juniors, are worried about their experience this coming fall and what it's going to be like. But I think from a college admissions point of view, because everybody's in the same boat, my advice to both the Oliver Scholars and all juniors would be, relax. You're gonna, as long as you were able to demonstrate good grades and a good program through the middle of the junior year, and you've shown some talent in whatever you do, that will be recognized.
Thanks. Randy?
Yeah, I would definitely like to echo Scott, just that, families are concerned about remaining competitive during the time, and though, the testing options are very limited, I think I try and take an optimistic approach to it. And as what God said, everybody's on a level playing field. And so for those students who are not necessarily the best test takers, it gives them an opportunity to highlight other areas of their college, of their high school experience to the colleges. And it also, speaks to what other activities they've been involved in and the other things that they've been involved in. It gives them an opportunity to kind of highlight those things for the schools, just to see how great they are outside of testing and those standardized scores.
I think there's two major things that kids are also worrying about. One is standardized testing. Now, everybody but maybe 8 or 9 schools at this point that are highly selective have gone SAT optional, or as California is going to be doing, and Caltech came out with today, they're not only SAT optional, they're SAT blind. They're not going to accept them, and they're not going to be looking at them. And there's clearly a trend in that direction. So kids that's a big freak out, because the access to testing is really limited now. The number of test sites that have closed down and those that are open have very limited openings. And the College Board keeps on saying they're going to make this work, but they weren't really great with the APs, and not a lot of people have confidence that they'll be able to test people. So I think that for a lot of kids, as Randy just mentioned, I think the SAT optional may be and I think also with some of the protests that are going on, I think that they're blending together to say this testing has not been something that's been the great equalizer it was set out to be back in the 20s, or actually by the turn of the century when it started. The second big issue, and Adrienne is probably going to talk about this quite a bit, is finances, because these colleges are hurting. They had to return a lot of money in the spring rather. Now in the fall, they have a lot fewer people being able to pay bills. A lot of people spent their college funds just paying for rent and mortgage and daily expenses. A lot more people are going to be out of work. So you have this real imbalance. The finances of the individuals have gone this way, and the college's finances have gone this way. So you have the perfect storm of, there's going to be less money available for kids. And unless the school is really well endowed, or the student does not need full financial aid, but if a school is not well endowed and the student needs a lot of financial aid, this may be a tough time to be applying for financial aid.
Adrienne,
So I'm going to
financial aid.
So I'm going to piggyback on that. A lot of that is definitely the conversations that are going on. I actually have close friends of mine whose children are getting ready to go to college now, and they're concerned, just like your juniors have concerns. So one thing that I always like to remind students and families is that we as financial aid administrators do have something which is called professional judgment. Professional judgment allows us to look at an individual student, as we always do, but look at them closely and see whether or not we can update their information to according to what their financial picture is right now. So, in other words, you have Jane Smith, who contacts the financial aid office of the school that she's going to go to and say, the financial picture of my parents have changed. I want to apply for professional judgment or some schools special condition. The college's financial aid office will then inform them of what it is that they would need. including a form that they would have them fill out, and then they would look at the information. Some schools call it a financial aid appeal. All of it is the same thing, but schools do have that available to students to do. So students should contact the financial aid officers of the colleges that they're going to attend and speak to them regarding that. Now, in terms of the juniors, I'm going to speak to them just like we are not going through the time frame that we're going through right now. I need you all to do what I always ask you all to do, and that is apply for scholarships. Scholarships are still available. Okay, you still have the same scholarships that were available last year that are available this year. And I reiterate that because I go to college fairs and I tell students to do it, and there's always scholarships that go unclaimed because there aren't enough people applying for them. And there are scholarships nationally that students do not apply for. So you need to do that as much as possible. There's no such thing as applying for too many scholarships. You need to apply for as many scholarships as possible so that you can get enough scholarships to help fray the cost of college
Where
tuition.
where where would families get information about those scholarships? How do you find that information?
So you have different places to go. I'm going to mention FastWeb as being one of them, but you also have some entities such as Sally Mae has a scholarship um, website. You also have some other loan companies that do have their own scholarships that you do not have to apply for a loan to apply for those scholarships. Then you also have, of course, you have places such as Colgate, you have Coca Cola, you have a lot of different small entities. If you belong to um, any type of house of worship. I was just going to say church, but let me just say house of worship. Any type of house of worship, a lot of the houses of worship have their own scholarship. Remember, there's no such thing as a scholarship that's too small because books are expensive. So you should apply for any type of scholarship that you see that's available. There are scholarships that are for left-handed people, scholarships that are based on race, scholarships based on religion, scholarships based on where you're living. There are scholarships from different groups such as any of the Greek letter organizations within the Black um, Greek letter community. Then you also have them amongst some of the honor societies. Then, of course, any of the colleges that you are applying to, they still have scholarships available. So you should definitely look at those scholarships. So, like the juniors that are looking at the colleges that they're going to apply for, you should look at the admissions websites of those colleges and the financial aid websites. So you're looking at the admissions websites because some of the merit-based scholarships are listed on the admissions pages, and in terms of the need-based scholarships, they're going to be listed on the financial aid websites of those colleges. And so you should see what are the criteria for each of those scholarships and not only see how you can apply for them, but of course you're going to be doing your admissions application at the same time. Again, apply for as many scholarships as possible.
I'll jump in here. I don't know if a lot of students can pay for a good percentage of their education through outside scholarships. Most kids, I mean, if the school colleges give out grant money, that I don't call that scholarship, it's just grant money from the school. But outside scholarships will help pay for books and supplies and transportation. But it's more hopeful than not. I would say for students who are really limited financially, if they live in New York or New Jersey, they should look at EOF. If they're Pell eligible, or HEOP in New York if they're Pell eligible, and that usually is a pretty affordable option if you're accepted into either of those programs. Also, the thing that's going to happen, and I don't know that this is going to be good news for kids or colleges, is as you move down the selectivity ladder of colleges, they're going to be more generous with their financial aid, because they had estimated as many as 700 colleges may eventually fold out of this thing, or at least are going to be in desperate financial shapes. And of those 700 colleges, I mean, one of the things we can talk about, Danielle, is our time at McBurney. I was doing admissions at a time where a school was in really desperate shape, and the board of directors said exactly what they're going to say to these admissions directors. We need money. If they can pay a half tuition, give them the other half. If they can pay $2,000 when our tuition was like $7 or $8 back then, give them the rest in financial aid. And I said that was a short-sighted thing to do, because those are going to be needs in the future. That's going to be what, going to be costs. But they were pretty desperate. And I think there's going to be a lot of desperate colleges out there that are going to give out financial aid just to make sure that they can fill empty seats. So, I mean, it might be a good year to shoot down for financial aid purposes.
So one of the things that we've started to talk about at Oliver is affordability. And, most of our students are doing exceptionally well academically. They have varying degrees of capacity to pay for college. And I think we're getting to the point now where, do you advise students to go to the most competitive college that they get into? Or should families really begin to shift focus on affordability? I just worry about, the impact, the long-term financial impact of excessive student debt and parent debt, quite frankly, on families, just to kind of get the name stamp of a competitive college.
I mean, they should go to the. Oh, go ahead. Do you want to say?
Yeah, I was going to say that I was having conversations with some of the parents who are my friends, and saying that this is the time, if you haven't had the conversations before, this is the time that you're having the hard conversations with your child about what it is that you can afford and what it is that you can't. All of us who've been to college before know that we had a dream college. Some of us went to our dream colleges, some of us did not. And we still were able to become successful people. So it's having those hard conversations with your children, saying, I know that this school is probably a school that you really, really want to go to, but I just cannot afford it. Now, does that mean that they should not apply for it if they're a junior? I would say no, they should still apply for it, because they might get a higher amount of financial aid, so that the parents are not coming out of their pocket, so to speak, so much in terms of that. But once they get their financial aid packages, there should be another conversation of reality check, so to speak, saying what it is that they can and cannot pay for. But these conversations are continuous conversations that have to happen. And because of what's happening in our society, there are going to be a lot more of those conversations happening right now.
I think general advice is not real helpful. What the advice I would give is students should go to the least expensive college that best meets their needs. And I'll use the example of my two older children, actually my 3 children. My oldest child, she went to Swarthmore. It was incredibly expensive for us with our income level. It was hard for us to do, but she was a burgeoning intellectual, and it was an environment that perfectly matched what she needed. She went into the field of social work, and I think that was definitely because of the kind of social justice focus that Swarthmore had. But my son got into Columbia, he got into University of Virginia, and he went to Rutgers for free. I mean, he had a full scholarship there, and he was very happy there, and that was the right place for him. So even though they made different decisions, both academically and financially, and the youngest child is now going to Temple, which is relatively inexpensive, but also, he loved it when he walked on campus. It was affordable for us. So you just make a decision based on what are your financial circumstances and what is the kid like and how important is it, and whether you could, as Adrienne said, can you make it work? If you can make it work, then you got to look at, how many kids do you have going? And what are your circumstances at different times? I mean, you got to look at a lot of other pictures. How about you, Randy? Is there anything you want to throw in here?
Yeah, I definitely would echo what both of you have said. Just about being realistic with the students. I know, especially at Oliver, I try and just guide the students around making the best choices, not necessarily having to make college decisions around their finances, but really thinking about where they want to be. And sometimes that's not at the most selective school because that school just doesn't fit their needs. But ultimately, it's about doing the research, finding out, which schools have the best options in terms of financial aid, which schools are going to provide 100% need, which schools are 100% need blind, and really thinking about the big picture. I think one of the larger conversations I try and have with students is actually doing the research and having these discussions earlier than junior year, so that way, your family is not caught off guard necessarily come junior year about making those decisions. The student is already knowledgeable about what their family can and cannot handle, and they're also knowledgeable about the actual financial circumstance. I know for me, as a student of color at the time, finances was not a typical conversation that I would have in my household. And so just preparing students early enough to engage in that conversation with their parents, because it's kind of a partnership when you're applying to college. It's not just the student and it's not just driven by the parent. Is crucial in kind of understanding the landscape and what the options are. So I would definitely say for Oliver scholars especially, don't limit yourself to applying to schools that are affordable. Apply to all of the ones that you want to go to, and then assess those schools based on acceptance and based on what they're willing to give you. And my last point would be to actually leverage opportunities. I don't know how many times I've advised students that when they get a civic financial aid package, they can go to another school that they really want to go to and say, look, Temple or Wheaton is offering me this. Can you match this? Because this is actually what my family can afford. And if they can get the other school to kind of come down and offer the same package, then it really levels the playing field for them.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting that you say that, Randy, because I got offers of admission to two colleges that I actually never applied to, but that were similar in size and scope and focus to the school that I actually ended up attending. So I guess they all do kind of talk to each other. So
Yeah.
Another thing that's kind of come up is this idea of fit. When we say, what is the fit for this student? What does fit mean? Like, what kinds of questions should parents be posing, and what kinds of things should they be paying attention to in terms of college and fit?
I think there's a single question. What's important to you? And I think it's a really intimidating question, but it's one that's asked too late in this process. And it really is a question of what are your values? You, Danielle, were somebody who was socially conscious. You wanted to be at some place that was really intellectual. You wanted an activist campus. I knew all those things about you, so that was the fit, and Swarthmore was a good fit. Oberlin would have been a good fit too. Vassar as well. I mean, the schools that you were looking at were good fits for you. My middle son would have had a tattoo of New Jersey in his arm. He loved New Jersey. He left Montclair High School to go to West Orange High School because he wanted to hang around with the kids who were on the soccer team who were mostly undocumented kids. And that was his comfort level. So going to Rutgers was a fit for him. And I think that I think looking at kids going to the most selective college, or looking at the school that has the best name brand or whatever else, or looking at colleges by what they were like 50 years ago, or looking at the U.S. News and World Report lists, I think they're all valueless. I think the reality is, there's a kind of person that thrives at a certain kind of school, and they will find that, my daughter, she went to one college when we were visiting schools, and I said, let's go to the dining hall after we had the tour, and she says, no, let's go, they're snotty here. She picked it up. She knew. And when my son visited Temple, he knew right away that I had thought that he was this artsy kid who would love like Bard or Skidmore. We visited there, and he was sort of lukewarm. When we walked on the Temple campus, he lit up like a Christmas tree. And I think that those college visits, even like, as you mentioned, Randy, if you're doing a trip right now and you're going through a certain area, just drive through certain schools. I remember my middle son, when we went to college in New Jersey, we were on our way to a soccer tournament. He says, I don't want to apply there. I'm not at all interested. And as soon as he got on campus, he said, Dad, this is exactly what I thought college should look like. So, and I think that that fit emerges if they do work instead of treating this like a contest to get into and go to just the most selective college they can possibly go into, and go to one that is going to feed their soul, is going to bring out the best in them.
Yeah, I definitely agree. You won't know what fit is until you actually step foot on campus. And I encourage everyone to go to, campus and do a visit, get a feel for the school, and really evaluate, who you are now, but also who you want to be after these 4 years are over. Which school is going to set you up to be your best self? Which school is going to put you in those networks that you don't necessarily have access to now? I think that was one of the greatest questions that I asked myself in choosing schools. It was, which school is going to really make the most out of my experience and actually let me into a community that I can still pull from, that I can still be a part of after I'm gone and after I've graduated. Which school has those professors who've done research that I want to be connected to? Which school has the study abroad opportunities of places that I've never even been to? And I think those are the questions that you're asking, aside from, food and dorm life, but it's really like, what does it look like for you beyond the 4 years as well?
That's great. Adrienne, so I would ask you, how early should families be thinking about college? And from a financial standpoint?
Well, there's no such thing as applying for scholarships too early. You need to start looking at it. I've met people who have been looking at it since junior high school, and to me, that's not too early. There are middle school scholarships that are available, so you should definitely start looking then, because some entities, even if you do apply, they'll hold the scholarship for you. So I would say start looking um, as soon as possible. As soon as possible. So I would say middle school.
I'd add in about, it's not just looking at financial aid and scholarships, but looking, actually planning for the financial part of college. I think way too many families wait till it's almost time for the kid to go to college and start thinking about, how we're going to pay for this. And I ask parents this question all the time. Is there money left over at the end of each month? And do you have money set aside? And if the answer is no to those two questions, you have very, very limited options in terms of colleges. So if there are times which are more flush when the kid is, even starting after the kid is born, start a college fund. There is that, accrued interest.
Yeah. You were going to say the 529?
Yeah, setting up a 529 or an education IRA or different kinds of financial instruments. But yeah, every family, if they can, even if it means $10 a month, whatever it means, but, put some money aside so at least you have something to help out.
Yeah, I would definitely echo what Scott said. And even, those students who are working, who begin working earlier, if there's any money that you can save, anything that you can spare, put it into a savings plan. One thing that my dad always said was, we do what we have to now so that we can do what we want to in the future. And so if that means small sacrifices now so that we can really go and do the things that we want in the future, then do it.
So, I had the opportunity to serve on the board of managers at Swarthmore for a brief period, which was like mind blowing, right? Because I never imagined that that's a door that would be open to me. But I did have the chance to interview some of our prospective students. And when I look at the resumes of the average high school student today, I feel like, oh my God, I never would have gotten in based on my credentials if I had to apply today. I see kids like, I founded this organization. I've, traveled around the world 3 times. Some of it seems to me like when is there time for like joy and family and some of the other things that I think I've benefited from. But what does it mean to be competitive at this moment in terms of college admission? How much is too much? How many clubs can you really join? What do you think folks are really looking for?
I want to talk about the mental health of students right now and what that means. I mean, sure, when you read those applications at Swarthmore, those are the people who made it. Those are the people who were pretty much successful at doing what they wanted to do. For every one of them, there's 10 kids who have been on this treadmill that they've been falling off of. The last 2 years I was at Columbia High School, but in each of the schools I've worked at, the number of students who are being sent out for suicidal ideation, 1 week we had 2 actual suicide attempts. It was a regular occurrence. We had 4 full-time clinicians at our school dealing with psychologically fragile kids. The emphasis on having to get into a name brand college and the obsession that so many kids have for that is driving kids nuts. I did a program with the kids where I had them in what they wanted their parents to know. And each homeroom came up with an answer, and they were all the same. They are totally stressed out and their parents are making it worse. And I had parents call me crying on the phone saying, I can't believe that I've been doing this. I think we got to take the pedal off the gas. I really do. I think that people have to start going back to, and I think that some of the things that are happening with the protest movement now and things that are happening with COVID and people's family, I'm hoping that this is a time where people are just more realistic about their lives, do what is good for them, not have this incredible feeling that they have to achieve in order to be successful. They have to get into the most selective school. I mean, all these people who are doing all this planning, most people change careers 5 times, change jobs almost a dozen times. There is a lot of changes that go on in people's lives, and these kids think that at 17 or 18 years old, they can plan for their entire future. They have to stop planning so much and start living a little bit more.
Amen to that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I also think it's about consistency. You don't want to be a member of club A, B, C, D, E, and F every year. I think colleges like to see consistency amongst their student body. And so if you love, computer science and you're a part of computer science, stick with it. If you're involved in arts, then stick with it. I think that the growth that you show from a freshman year to a senior year, being part of one club versus being a part of 5 across your entire high school career is a little bit different. It speaks up to your kind of wherewithal, your ability to stay focused, your ability to uphold a mission, and really to do something that you believe in. And so I would encourage students, especially Oliver scholars, to continue to do what they love. Don't overburden yourself with thousands of clubs, thousands of things, and don't feel like you're competing with people around you. You're competing with yourself. You do what you can do to the best of your own abilities. It's easy for us to look to our left and look to our right and see what everyone else is doing. But if you're doing something that truly makes you happy, then stick with that.
I would wanted to tell a quick story of kid that this is how much things have changed since the day when you were applying to college, Danielle. This is a girl who loved animals and worked at a Paws Animal Shelter in town. She would feed the animals, she'd walk the animals, she'd do all these things. And I asked her a question one time. Are you doing this because it's something you really love? Are you doing it because you want something on your resume to go to college? And her answer made me cry. She said, I don't know. And you wouldn't have that question back in the 1980s. You know, you did things because they were the right thing to do. And kids are really conflicted about that. But I would agree with Randy. I think that, you know, it should be organic. I think the people who, you know, don't go to Costa Rica to build houses during the summer. Everybody's doing that, and it looks really, don't do something that you think looks good on a resume, join a club that you never even have anything to do with. Do things which are really feed your soul, things that really move you, things that are genuine. And it will come, it is a very organic process applying to colleges. And I get surprised when I talk to college admissions folks. There was a woman from Yale who I spoke to, and we were talking about a kid, and I said, you know, to the student, I said, when she met you, she said, she didn't meet me, but she described her in a way that really captured, and I don't know how she did it with just an application, but it happens. And this kid was somebody who was really genuine and did what they loved and followed through and had corroboration in the things they did. And it just emerges. So, you know, I would go totally with Randy. You know, this should be something that do what you do what you love, do what you do well, do what you enjoy doing, and, you know, and commit yourself to it. And that will shine through.
Yeah, I would reiterate that, even though I'm coming from the financial aid side. I know that when admissions people are reading the applications, they're looking for authenticity. And, you know, looking from your left, looking to your right, you need to look within, because you can't follow somebody else to do, you know, going to Costa Rica or doing something else when that's not what your passion is. And so when it's going to be time for you to write your essay, you're not going to be talking from that space. You're going to be talking from a space which is not you, and that's going to come through. So be true to yourself.
And some of the, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's so important, because I remember applying to college, Adrienne and Scott. I initially wasn't going to put like the Celestial Choir, shout out to Canaan Baptist Church, or the Baptist Youth Fellowship on my college application, because it's like, that's not academic. But that was a part of who I was. And so I know you don't remember, Scott, but I'm glad that you had the good sense to make sure that those were the kinds of things that I included in that application. So what are you seeing in terms of best practices at colleges and universities? How has this game shifted from their perspective? And do you feel like institutions are really listening to communities and leaning in? Do you think that's what informed the decision not to continue with the SAT? And then, you know, just as an aside, like I've heard people say like, oh my God, if we don't have the SAT or the ACT, how are we going to assess, you know, who's really ready for this institution? So, you know, I've been hearing things on both sides, and I'm just wondering what your experiences are. Adrienne, obviously you're still working in higher ed.
It's such a moving target. Really, it's changing by the hour. I mean, today, Caltech came and said that they were going to not have the SATs showing up. And also, you know, we might even see another spike after all these protests with all the lack of social distancing. And that may be a game changer. They may decide not to open campuses. You know, I think the colleges are as, you know, uncertain as we are. I think if you want to see the statement, John Bokenstadt over at Oregon State did what was probably the best thing to do, say, look, we want you, but we're not going to ask you to commit because we can't tell you anything. But we would like you to put a deposit. It's refundable until September 1. If you want to have a gap year, we understand and we'll accommodate that. And was as flexible as possible. And then you have some of the schools that are, I mean, most of the Ivy Leagues have not gone. I mean, Dartmouth just changed the day before yesterday, and they made a very strong statement. They stated that going optional is not something that should be done with a wink and a nod and be at all. Test optional is test optional. You have Cornell and you have Harvard saying, well, we'll accept you not having testing under exceptional circumstances. That's not being test optional, and it's not being very student friendly either. And I think that, this is going to be an eye-opening for a lot of families if they look closely, because the schools which are not being flexible at this point are schools which may not have the kind of student-centeredness that they want to have in a school. I heard, I was talking to one admissions dean at one of the most selective schools, and he gave a very, sort of other side of the picture. He said, look, we go to a lot of schools. We have been going to urban schools for a very long time, and now we're actually going more into rural kind of schools that we had never gone to before. And we don't know what those grades mean. The school profiles are not that good. We don't know those students. We don't know what those grades are. So, not having standardized testing, everybody who applies to us as straight A's. Everybody who applies to us as president of their class. How do we distinguish kids without those test scores? And, he gave a very valid argument. But, the bottom line is, I don't think that, for seniors, it's really uncertain whether they can do this safely. And the information we get is changing by the day. Now we hear that, asymptomatic kids are not very high risk of giving the virus to other people. So colleges may be a lot safer than we thought, but that's today. Yesterday we thought something else, and tomorrow we're going to think something different. So, it's really hard for colleges to make decisions, and it's even harder for students to make decisions with juniors in terms of whether to take the SATs and whether they can take it, how they're going to present themselves, what are colleges going to look like. But for seniors, my son's are going to be a returning sophomore, and I don't think he's planning on returning next year. He thinks that they're not going to be lecture classes; those are going to be online. He didn't thrive on the online environment at all. And I think there's a lot of kids who say that they don't want to be in even a hybrid environment. And I think most schools are going to have to be hybrid. I don't think they're going to be lecture halls anymore. So a lot of kids are going to have to, and if you have an immunocompromised or at-risk person at home, if you're afraid of bringing this disease home, you may be afraid to go off to college. I think more people who are seniors and even juniors are going to start looking a little bit closer to home, are going to look at alternatives that aren't quite as expensive when their finances are a little bit more trouble. And they're going to be looking at taking a gap year. And I think that this is a great time to be doing that because it's a good opportunity. There's a lot of people who are going to be at need. Right now we have a situation where we're pumping a lot of money into people who are unemployed and to people who are food insecure, but that money's going to dry out soon. And we're going to need an army of kids who are not immunocompromised, who don't get seriously sick from this disease, to do a lot of things we need to help out people in society, people who are hungry, people who are home insecure. Those things are going to be much more desperate in the next year, and we're going to need people to help take care of those people who are living in and can't get out to the supermarket. All those things are going to need people to help out within the next year.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with Scott in that there's a lot of schools who are being more flexible than others. And I think those schools who are not as flexible are, afraid to lose their prestige as a selective institution. But I think, especially given this time, you just have to be realistic and you have to embrace the times. Things are changing constantly. And, honestly, for students, while I haven't advised on something like this, is really case by case basis. I think there will be families who will take that gap year and consider staying home because, for most, even students who are taking online classes now in high school, it's not the most effective way or conducive environment for learning. And so it's hard for them to really focus for 8 hours or 7 hours just looking at a computer screen. And so I would say that, they really need to think about all of the options, consider all of the options. But a best practice would be to just embrace the landscape and take it day by day. I think definitely extending deadlines for deposits and things like that, and making those options refundable is something that I've heard across the board for the most part. And even with schools who are expecting students to enroll, being honest with students and saying that, there may not be an on-campus option for the fall. There may be options where you're going to have to take classes online. And so really just being informative and communicative with families as much as possible is really the best practice.
And from where I am, I know in higher ed, there have been so many different types of conversations going on regarding that. You had some schools who automatically knew they were not going to have summer classes, and then as of right now, I would say all summer classes are online. So then there's were the conversations about the fall term, and depending on when you were ending your award year or academic year for 1920, you're determining, when are you going to start. For those people who begin classes in August, the question was, if you have fall breaks, are you still going to have the fall breaks, or are you not going to have fall breaks and end early? And a lot of the colleges came out in different articles and also on their websites and saying, we are going to open and have students come into the dorms and congregate on campus and have classes. However, there will be no fall breaks, and everybody will come home like before. I'm hearing before Thanksgiving, and then the finals will be online or different variations of that. And then some of the colleges that are upstate in New York, I'm hearing that some of them are having starting later and doing similar, but just starting later. So there are different variations. So again, definitely like what Randy was saying, keep in contact with the college or university that you're planning on attending to get the right information. And if you're a returning student and you already know that um, being online is not something that you prefer, you don't think that you excel at that, be real about yourself about that, and take the time to take it off. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but do that and then go back to return. If you're a person who does not know, which a lot of students, even if you were in high school, going to college online is still going to be different. Um, Go to your college online. Remember that we as administrators are here to help you, no matter what area it is. If it's the faculty member, the persons in the registrar, the people in the financial aid office, the bursar, the business office, we want to make sure that your experience is as good as we can possibly have you have it, even if it is virtual. So we are available at all the colleges to speak to you. We do a lot of Zoom calls nowadays, so we are available to actually virtually see you and speak to you if you prefer that, or some colleges even do the regular phone calls. But we are definitely here to help.
Thank you
I
for
think
that.
there's another issue
Okay.
of what level of sort of risk are you willing to take in terms of your health and your family's health. I think it's a fool's errand to think that students are not going to infect themselves almost immediately upon getting to campus. I mean, it's going to spread through. They call colleges campuses either a petri dish or a cruise ship on land. Sure, there'll be. I mean, they talk about wearing masks and social distancing in classes and things, but these kids have been cooped up for an awful long time, and you can guarantee it within minutes of arriving on campus, they're going to start engaging in risky behavior, and socially and in sexually. I mean, it's just There's no way that they're not going to have, rave parties as soon as they get there. There was a picture of University of Colorado graduation situation, and the kids were just all on top of each other. So I think if the thought is that, they're going to prevent infection, it's not going to happen. I don't know how they're going to possibly isolate kids who are infected, or whether they're going to, they will not have, they will not be able to single dorms. They will not be able to prevent it in the bathrooms, in the dining halls, on the shuttle buses, all over. So, for my own son, if he went back to school, I hope he would just be as careless as possible, get it real quickly, and not bring it back home. That's, but everybody has to think about their own risk. If you're a commuter student, it can have a big impact if you're going to be bringing it home to your family. And, we're hearing every day about what the risk is of getting it and passing it on to others. So, there's an awful lot of more issues rather than where you're just going to school or, how you're going to choose things, but, whether you're going to keep your family healthy and safe as well.
So we have a question, and I was just going to invite people to ask questions, which is kind of like funny to me because I know when I was coming up and even when I first started working in college access organizations, the joke was like, Black kids ain't doing no gap year. That's for rich people, right? And so now there's this possibility that more and more students will be availing themselves of a gap year. And the question that we have is there is the concern that students may not return to school a real concern? Or, how can families structure this sans being able to send a kid, backpacking around the world to make sure that at the end of the gap year, they're focused and ready to learn and can still access financial aid too?
I think a gap year is very taboo, like you said, within the Black community. But I think one thing right now, especially, is just to keep your eye on the prize and remember what it is that your goal was. It's easy to slip into comfortability. It's easy to feel like you need to continue to work if that's what you've been doing for your gap year, or continue to do whatever it is that you've been doing. But really, staying competitive, again, it's just like, I liken it to a long summer break. Taking one online class, doing your reading, continuing with whatever literature you've been engaged in, but definitely, not allowing yourself to forget about what the true goal is, and also, thinking about who you are as a student. If you can manage to take an online class and enroll in something online, then do that. But ultimately, it's about your health and about your safety, and so you'd rather not put yourself at risk, or risk harming others and your family. And so taking a gap year, if that's the best option for you and your family, then do it. But just remain competitive and keep pushing as far as what your goal is.
So, Adrienne, I'm a great student. I got into the college of my dreams. I have a wonderful financial aid package, and now I have this genius idea to take a gap year. And my mother is terrified that all the financial aid is going to go away, and won't be available when I come back to my senses and return to school. Is that a realistic concern that a lot of first generation families may have?
Excuse me. Yes, it is a concern that people have. I would say, number one, as I was saying before, make sure you speak to the college that you're talking to. So in this scenario, the student should make sure that their place is held for next year. So if we're talking about for the fall, they're gonna have their space held until for fall 21. Now, in terms of financial aid, if we're talking about federal, or if they're going to a college in a state that has state aid in their part of that state, then they have to reapply. So remember that October 1st is the beginning of the renewal for the FAFSA and for any state aid. So I would say, just remember you have to do that annually. So you're going to be doing that now. In terms of any merit-based aid that the college is has awarded you. You need to speak to them to see whether or not you would be able to retain all of it or a portion of it. And only that entity that is providing it, because I said college, but it might not just be the college, it might be an outside entity that's giving you funds also. You need to see how long that is. If they're giving you the guideline that, okay, we'll hold it for you, but you must come back the following year in fall 21. So that needs to be a conversation that you have with the college and or entity that is providing those funds to you. You're muted.
See, I'm following rules and now muted. So we just had a question from Patricia. What's up, Golden Era Heath? And she is about to become a mom and wants to know what steps she can be taking to make sure that her child has access to college in the future.
How many, say that again? Sorry.
So this is a young woman who's about to become a mother and
Yes.
is already thinking about college and wondering what steps she should be taking to make sure that she's able to send her child, her future child. She didn't give birth, I don't think.
So
Not
the
yet.
529 plan that
The
we talked about earlier
529, Patricia.
is definitely something that should definitely invest in. Also, if you just have an account that you put aside that you don't touch, that you put money in, you can do both. So I
Or
would say
even
doing that.
an IRA or something early, getting a bond, and saving between now and the time that she's ready to go to college, then definitely we'll have a good pool of money to pull from.
So before we jump off of this conversation, we have to honor the fact that our country is embroiled in a major social movement that I'm pretty excited about because I feel like I'm having conversations around everything as it pertains to racial disparities that I've never been able to have before. What effect, in addition to COVID, right? What effect do you all think the movement to preserve Black life is going to have on college access in the future?
Well, I think there's going to be a real balance there. I think there's going to be demands at certain colleges and at high schools that the colleges start hiring more minority candidates for teaching positions. I think that they're going to make certain demands about increasing the financial aid budget and increasing the diversity of the schools. I don't know how possible that is going to be. And I think that it's going to change. This is a movement that has really energized students today. And I think that it's going to be a much more activist student body. And I think that kids are going to go to places where they can make a difference in the world. I think that's my sort of hopeful piece about this, is that students of all color will be thinking about, this movement and what it means for society as a whole, not just their own individual lives. And I think that, I don't think that it's going to have a lot of the demands that some of the students are putting forth are just not financially feasible. And it's, coming on the heels of this COVID crisis makes this difficult to do many of the things that people want done. But I think that there will be changes. I think that people are changing in terms of their priorities are changing, and I think their view of life is changing. And I think that that's not going to have anything but a positive impact on the kids.
I would also say that this also gives voice to a lot of Black and brown students. And in particular, I'm just remembering my campus. We had a diversity and inclusion office on campus that we felt was kind of bound to the college leadership. And I'm hoping that during this time, those offices are either being built up on campuses that where they exist, or being founded and created in campuses where they don't, to really have an actual enforcement arm or an activist arm to actually mobilize and do things on campus where they've never had before, and definitely pushing to hire more faculty and staff of color, just to see and go to schools where you're around people that look and have similar experiences to you makes all the difference. And so I'm hoping that, you know, colleges will stand behind their Black and brown students, and really give them that sense of empowerment that we all need.
Adrienne, did you want to say something? You're muted.
I did the same thing.
Uh,
Okay. I was going to say that this is a very important time, and a lot of students, if they haven't already done so beforehand, they're looking at the college campuses that they've already selected or they're thinking of selecting, and seeing just what type of campus they are in terms of social justice, because of the climate that we have been living in for a while, but has come to the forefront right now, because they realize that it's much more important to them to attend a college campus that it has their similar views. So if they didn't think about that as being one of the criteria in a college that they were looking at, they definitely are looking at that now. So college campuses are having conversations regarding that.
well, we are at the end of our hour. I want to thank all three of you for participating in this panel. This panel discussion is going to live on the Oliver Scholars YouTube channel. So we're going to make it available to families that weren't able to participate today. I also would be remiss if I did not give a shout out to Moshe Crone, my producer extraordinaire. Woo! And a hearty congratulations to the Oliver Scholars class of 2020. And we're going to be riding with the rest of you through this journey. And Scott and Adrienne in particular, I hope that we can count on you to come and fellowship with our community again in the future.
Yeah,
you
of
have
course.
a lot of
Got it.
expertise.
You got it. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for
Okay.
having us, Danielle.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Okay, take care.